Welcome, patrons. I've had a weird couple of weeks, so this is the perfect time for another comment roundup, Spring 2019 edition. Dreamers. Orpheus MC says, "Wow, super informative to me. I never really realized a mage's ability to shape their dreams was on a scale. What about Dorian? In banter, he mentions making his dreams in the Fade look super pleasant and male desire demons would be attracted to him. Is that normal, really good mage dreaming or dreamer dreaming? Wow, I wish they had a better word for this, lol." So what is being referenced here is actually what Dorian says when coming along in the Fade during the Here Lies the Abyss quest. He doesn't actually mention changing his dreams, but this is actually recounting his time during his harrowing. So what is described in the comment would be something a dreamer could do, not your average mage. Viper says, "So there was decline in the dreamer population near the beginning of the Deventer Imperium, and those who are dreamers tend to have a shorter lifespan. Dreamers, supposedly, are said to be of Dalish/Elvish descent. Could Thalison and Aurelian have an elven ancestor somewhere in their bloodline? But now there's an increase of a dreamer's lifespan as of recent years. Could this be correlated with the Veil? Since dreamers are supposedly to have elvish blood in them, and elves are intrinsically connected to the Fade, could creating the Veil be the cause of the dreamers more or less disappearing? And now that the Veil is weakening, or with the breach causing a large influx of magic from the Fade to the world of the living, is what's causing current dreamers to live longer?" So I really have no answers, but I do want to tweak this question a bit because I think there are some inaccuracies in it. So dreamers have a short lifespan because it was very easy for them to become possessed, so they would and would die. The amount of magic coming in from a weakening veil wouldn't actually change that. There's also a long history of humans from Deventer being dreamers, and as humans have no record of the Veil coming up, it would have to have been post-Veil. While there is a possibility that all of those dreamers were half-elven, from the stories it would just be odd to me unless there was some horrific movement to have human dreamers and a lot of elven people were forced into it. But anyway, if anything, being able to be dreamers suddenly stopped, and we aren't really sure why. Perhaps the elven blood became less potent like is suggested here, or something else happened like the blights. Chris Aries says, "Dwarven Warden's dream. Does the joining then connect them to the Fade because the lyrium in the mix? Because Ogren's odd dream after his joining isn't a blight dream." So honestly, it's hard to say. One would assume that the joining actually joins the Dwarven Wardens to the Fade, letting them be able to dream, but it could also just be that the devs forgot and let Ogren have some weird non-blight dream for the laughs. Andoral. From Jacob Sedlak, "It is quite possible that the Chantry's rendition of the Deventer gods are possessing almost exclusively negative domains that have been a propaganda spin. Dumont sounds very much like a god of death, but worshipped as a chief deity, like if the Egyptians made Osiris top god over Ra. Andoral as a god of labor and laborers, who in Deventer would almost exclusively be saves, makes sense as a deliberate mistranslation by Andrastian clerics, and the faithful to demonize the old gods, and rightfully so, since there it was the priesthood who were responsible for the blights." So this is an interesting theory, but I just don't think it's the case. Every time we get some information about the old gods pre-Chantry, they still use the negative domains. And so far, Dragon Age hasn't really been shy about letting us know what the Chantry has covered up in shady history. So that being said, the best place for this to come up would really be in Dragon Age 4 when we're in Deventer. So if this is all true, it would probably be said during that game. Alejandro Camacho Rios says, "I always wanted to know how people knew the names of the archdemon they killed." And then Inquisitor Trevelyan says, "The Grey Wardens know where all the old gods are sleeping below the ground. That's how the architect found out about Etherimel's location. The architect was Etherimel's high priest. Don't ask me how they know, that part isn't clear. Since the Grey Wardens know which old gods is who, and people look to the wardens during a blight, that's probably how people know." So I will say that hidden in the Codex Old Gods and Dragon Age Origins, there is one little line. "The archdemons have been identified only after years of argument among scholars, and to this day it is unclear whether the archdemons are truly old gods and not simply dragons." So while it's true that the wardens know where the old god prisons are, before that there were years of debate in scholars. Now, how do we know that the archdemon of the Fifth Blight was Arthemiel before it ever really began? I don't really know. It's kind of one of those game things I think they just kind of threw in there because I forgot to write a good answer for it. Believe It 1051 says, "Slight correction, the old gods aren't asleep in the deep roads. They are asleep in the prisons underground, which could be at the deep roads or tiges or just carved out of chambers like underground caves, lakes, or even within Titans." So this is a good point. The deep roads were the highways that the Dwarven Empire built, and the prisons are supposed to be deeper than that somewhere else. So I guess just keep that in mind. In the video when I said that they were locked in the deep roads, I just kind of meant underground because that's just where my mind was. The Silent Grove. Shephawk says, in DAO, Alistair explains that he never started using lyrium since he never became a full Templar, but that lyrium isn't necessary to perform a Templar's moves, but that it just increases their power, so he never took lyrium, on the side or otherwise. So this is one of those devs give us conflicting information deals. Alistair did totally say that in Dragon Age Origins. He totally did. But he also has Templar abilities, which they later retconned to say that they have to have taken lyrium. This is one of those facts that we're in like this weird quantum state where it's treated as fact, but it's also impossible, and it drives me nuts. But let's be real, this is just a fantasy fun story. Things are going to conflict sometimes, and that's okay, and this is just one of them. Dirthamen. Lathan says, there's also the mystery of the statue being stabbed and bleeding in the Fade. One part of the Fade in which the lovely family reunion with old god baby Kieran, Flemeth, and Morgan takes place. Another interesting fact is that there are 2 ravens, the Free Marches statue, near the stairs that leads into the Nightmare's lair, Fear Demon. But it could just be a coincidence and devs were reusing the same models, no hidden meaning or anything. Still, I always found that interesting. So this is something I actually left out of the video because I just didn't know if it was actually related and I don't really know what to do with it. But yeah, during that event there is a statue where in some places is connected to Dirthamen that is stabbed and bleeding. This honestly just goes under one of those things where I can't decide if this was done on purpose or because it looks cool. So at this point, it's up to you if you think it's actually Dirthamen or not. I also want to talk about the 2 raven statues. So I don't actually think they're ravens, to be quite honest. Because they're supposed to be representing of Kirkwall. We see them in Kirkwall all the time. They were made in Dragon Age 2 and just ported to Inquisition because it's something they could use. So it's representing of Kirkwall. In Heart of Hightown, Varric talks about all the time that there are cormorants all over Kirkwall. And if you Google a picture of a cormorant, they look much more like the statue does than a raven does. So maybe it's supposed to represent a raven somewhere else in the game, but I think originally that statue is supposed to be a cormorant. K.A. Tate says, I just realized something and maybe I'm wrong, but wasn't the veil created to lock in the gods in the Fade? And if so, how did falon'din go past the veil into the Fade? So something to keep in mind is that most of the stories we have about Dirthamen and falon'din are all from the Dalish, a people who don't know that there was a time without the veil. It's likely that this tale could be made by the Dalish completely, or that after years of retelling, it's been warped to this form. Another thing is that the Fade exists with and without the veil. The Fade would just be all around people instead of over there being held by the veil. The only thing that would really change the story is that there's no veil to cross. Now, what the Fade looked like in the time of the Elves is mostly unknown to us. We do get a few hints in the Vir Dirthara during some of the Codex entries, but even then it's very vague. So really the best I can say is that it's possible to still have the story be like a nugget of truth in there. I just don't know how the story would be different, if that makes any sense. And that's all I have. I will say next week there aren't really going to be any lore videos because I have family coming in town and I'm going to be all focused on that. Do you have lingering questions, proof that I'm wrong, comments about your own fan theory? Feel free to tweet me at @Gildathon on Twitter or send a PM to user Gillanon on Reddit. Duresh Sharal.